The morning sun was just starting to warm the highway when Denise pulled off at a small gas station about 40 miles outside of town. She had been driving for almost an hour already, and her tank was getting low. The station was one of those old places you find in rural areas, the kind with faded paint on the walls and a single attendant inside who probably knew everyone in the county by name. Denise was 34 years old, and she had the kind of quiet confidence that comes from years of hard work and discipline. She didn't talk much about what she did for a living unless someone asked directly. Most people just saw a woman in casual clothes, maybe on her way to visit family or running errands on a Saturday morning. What they didn't see was the decade she had spent serving in the United States Army. They didn't see the countless hours she had spent training soldiers in hand-to-hand combat. They didn't see the 2 deployments overseas, the commendations, the respect she had earned from men and women who had seen real combat. Today, she was just a woman stopping for gas. She pulled her car up to one of the pumps and turned off the engine. Through the windshield, she could see a group of motorcycles parked near the front of the station. There were about 6 or 7 of them, big bikes with chrome that caught the sunlight. A group of men stood around them, talking and laughing. Some of them were drinking from cans wrapped in brown paper bags. Even though it was barely 11 in the morning, Denise didn't pay them much attention. She had seen plenty of bikers in her life, and most of them were regular people who just liked riding. She grabbed her wallet from the passenger seat and stepped out of the car. The air was cool and clean, the kind of air you only get out in the country away from the city. She took a deep breath and walked to the pump, sliding her card into the machine. While she waited for it to process, she stretched her arms above her head. Her shoulders were still tight from the workout she had done that morning before leaving. Even on her days off, she kept to her routine. Discipline was something the Army had taught her, and it had become a part of who she was. The machine beeped, and she started filling her tank. The smell of gasoline filled the air as the numbers on the pump climbed slowly upward. She leaned against her car and looked out at the empty road stretching into the distance. It was going to be a good day. Her grandmother was expecting her for lunch, and the old woman always cooked enough food to feed an army. Denise smiled at the thought. She didn't notice that one of the men near the motorcycles had stopped talking to his friends. She didn't see the way he was looking at her, his eyes narrowing as he took another long drink from his can. His name was Roy, and he was the kind of man who had never really grown up. At 52 years old, he still acted like he was the toughest guy in every room. He had a shaved head, a thick beard going gray at the edges, and arms covered in faded tattoos. He wore a leather vest with patches that he thought made him look intimidating. Roy had been drinking since breakfast, and the alcohol had made him bold in all the wrong ways. He watched Denise standing by her car, and something ugly stirred in his chest. He didn't like seeing her there. He didn't like that she seemed so calm, so unbothered, like she belonged anywhere she wanted to be. He nudged the man standing next to him, a younger guy named Pete who mostly just followed Roy around because he didn't have anywhere else to be. "You see that?" Roy said, nodding toward Denise. Pete looked over and shrugged. "What about her?" "What's she doing here?" Roy muttered. "This ain't her part of town." Pete shifted uncomfortably. He didn't like when Roy got like this, but he also didn't have the courage to say anything. He just took another drink and hoped Roy would let it go, but Roy wasn't the type to let things go. He crushed his empty can and tossed it on the ground. "I'm gonna go say hello," he said with a grin that had no warmth in it. He started walking toward the pumps, his boots heavy on the concrete. A couple of the other guys noticed and started to follow, curious about what was going to happen. They formed a loose group behind Roy, 5 or 6 of them moving like a pack. Denise heard them coming before she saw them. The sound of boots on pavement, the low murmur of voices. She glanced over her shoulder and saw the group approaching. Her expression didn't change. She had dealt with men like this before, more times than she could count. In the Army, she had learned to read people quickly, to assess threats before they became problems. Right now, her instincts were telling her to stay, calm but stay alert. She turned back to the pump and watched the numbers continue to climb. 15 gallons, 16, almost done. "Hey there," Roy called out from behind her. His voice was loud and fake friendly. The way people talk when they're looking for trouble but want to pretend they're not. Denise didn't turn around. "Morning," she said simply. Roy stopped a few feet away from her. His friends spread out behind him, forming a half circle. None of them looked particularly threatening on their own, but together they took up a lot of space. That was the point, Denise knew. They wanted her to feel surrounded. They wanted her to feel small. She didn't? You passing through? Roy asked. Don't think I've seen you around here before. Just stopping for gas, Denise replied. Her voice was calm and even. She still hadn't turned to face him fully. Roy took a step closer. This is a pretty quiet area, he said. We don't get a lot of visitors. Especially not... He paused, letting the words hang in the air like a threat. Well, you know... Denise finally turned to look at him. She studied his face for a moment, taking in the bloodshot eyes, the sneer trying to hide behind a smile. She had seen that look before. She knew exactly what kind of man she was dealing with. Especially not what? She asked quietly. Roy's smile flickered. He wasn't used to people pushing back. Most people got nervous when he approached them like this. Most people looked away or hurried to leave. But this woman was looking right at him, and there was something in her eyes that he couldn't quite read. Nothing, he said, trying to recover. Just saying maybe you want to fill up quick and get moving. Safer that way. I'll leave when I'm done, Denise said. She turned back to the pump just as it clicked off, signaling her tank was full. She removed the nozzle slowly, deliberately, and placed it back on the hook. Then she screwed her gas cap back on and closed the little door. The whole time, she could feel them watching her. She could feel Roy's frustration building, his pride wounded by her refusal to be afraid. She knew this wasn't over. Men like Roy didn't walk away when they felt disrespected. They pushed until something broke. She picked up her receipt from the pump and folded it neatly, putting it in her pocket. Then she turned and started walking toward the station's small convenience store. She wanted a bottle of water for the road, and she wasn't about to let these men change her plans. Behind her, she heard Roy mutter something to his friends. She heard a few of them laugh, low and mean. She kept walking, her steps steady and unhurried. Whatever was going to happen, she was ready for it. Denise walked toward the convenience store with steady steps. She could hear the group of men following behind her, their boots scraping against the pavement. They weren't even trying to be quiet about it. They wanted her to know they were there. They wanted her to feel their presence like a weight pressing down on her shoulders. But Denise had carried heavier weights than this. She had marched through deserts with 60 pounds of gear on her back. She had trained in conditions that would break most people. A few drunk bikers trying to intimidate her on a Saturday morning was nothing compared to what she had already survived as she pushed open the door to the convenience store and stepped inside. A small bell above the door jingled, announcing her arrival. The store was dim and cool, with shelves lined with snacks and drinks and all the usual things you find at roadside gas stations. Behind the counter sat an older man with white hair and thick glasses. He looked up when she came in and gave her a small nod. "Morning," he said. "Morning," Denise replied. She walked to the back of the store where the refrigerators hummed softly. She opened one of the glass doors and grabbed a bottle of water. Cold air spilled out and touched her face, and for a moment she just stood there, enjoying the quiet. Then the bell above the door jingled again. She didn't have to turn around to know who it was. She could hear Roy's heavy breathing, could smell the alcohol even from across the store. She heard his friends shuffle in behind him, their boots loud on the tile floor. The old man behind the counter looked up, and his expression changed. There was worry in his eyes now. The kind of worry that comes from knowing trouble when you see it. Denise closed the refrigerator door and turned around slowly. Roy was standing in the middle of the store, blocking the path to the counter. His friends had spread out behind him, filling up the small space. There were 5 of them in total, not counting Roy. Some of them looked uncomfortable, like they weren't sure they wanted to be part of whatever was about to happen. But none of them made any move to leave. "Didn't mean to scare you off out there," Roy said with a grin. His words were slightly slurred from the drinking, and just wanted to have a friendly conversation. I'm not scared, Denise said. Her voice was calm and clear, and I'm not interested in a conversation. She started walking toward the counter, but Roy stepped to the side, putting himself directly in her path. He was close now, close enough that she could see the red veins in his eyes, the sweat on his forehead. He was bigger than her by at least 6 inches and probably 80 pounds. He thought that mattered. See, that's not very friendly, Roy said. I'm trying to be nice here. Trying to give you some advice. This ain't the kind of place for someone like you. People around here, they like things a certain way. They don't like strangers coming in and acting like they own the place. Denise looked at him without blinking. Someone like me, she repeated slowly. And what exactly is someone like me? Roy's grin widened. He thought he had her now. He thought she was getting upset, that he was getting under her skin. You know what I mean, he said. Don't play dumb. Behind him, one of his friends shifted nervously. Roy, come on, man, he said. Let's just go. This ain't worth it. Shut up, Pete, Roy snapped without looking back. His eyes were locked on Denise. I'm just having a conversation. The old man behind the counter cleared his throat. There a problem here? He asked. His voice was shaky, but he was trying to sound firm. Roy glanced over at him. No problem, old-timer. Just talking to my new friend here. Why don't you mind your business? The old man's jaw tightened, but he didn't say anything else. He was scared, Denise could tell. He had probably seen Roy and his friends around before. He knew what they were capable of when they were drunk and looking for someone to push around. Denise took a slow breath. She had been in situations like this more times than she could count. In the army, she had learned that the best way to handle a bully was to stay calm and wait for them to make a mistake. Bullies always made mistakes. They got overconfident. They pushed too hard. And when they did, that was when you responded. I'm going to pay for my water, she said quietly. And then I'm going to leave. I suggest you step aside. Roy laughed. It was a harsh sound full of contempt. You suggest? He repeated. Who do you think you are, giving me suggestions? This is my town. These are my roads. You don't get to come in here and tell me what to do. He stepped even closer, invading her personal space. She could feel the heat coming off his body, could smell the beer on his breath. He was trying to make her flinch, trying to make her back away. He wanted to see fear in her eyes. He didn't find it. Last chance, Denise said. Her voice hadn't changed at all. It was still calm, still steady, but there was something underneath it now, something hard as steel. Step aside. Roy's face twisted with anger. He wasn't used to this. He was used to people cowering, apologizing, scrambling to get away from him. This woman was different, and it was making him furious. Or what? He snarled. What are you going to do about it? For a long moment, neither of them moved. The store was completely silent except for the hum of the refrigerators and the distant sound of cars passing on the highway. Roy's friends stood frozen behind him, watching. The old man behind the counter had his hand under the register, probably reaching for a phone to call for help. Denise looked at Roy, and she made a decision. She wasn't going to throw the first punch. She never did. That wasn't how she had been trained, and it wasn't who she was. But she also wasn't going to back down. She wasn't going to let this man and his friends run her off like she was nothing. She had served her country. She had earned her place in this world. And she wasn't about to let some drunk bully take that away from her. I'm not going to do anything, she said finally, unless you put your hands on me. And trust me when I tell you, you don't want to do that. Roy stared at her. Something in her voice, something in her eyes, made him hesitate for just a second. There was a warning there that even his alcohol-soaked brain could recognize. But his pride was too strong and his friends were watching. He couldn't back down now. Not in front of everyone. You threatening me? He asked. No, Denise said simply. I'm making you a promise. The silence stretched between them like a rubber band about to snap. Roy's hands had curled into fists at his sides. His face was red with anger and wounded pride. Behind him, Pete and the others exchanged nervous glances. They could feel it too, that sense of something about to break, and then Roy reached out and shoved her. It wasn't a punch, not exactly. Just a hard push to her shoulder, meant to knock her off balance, meant to show her who was in charge. His hand connected with her collarbone, and he pushed with all the force of his drunken anger. Denise didn't stumble. She barely moved at all. She just looked down at the hand that had touched her, then back up at Roy's face. And for the first time, something flickered in Roy's eyes. It wasn't fear, not yet. But it was the beginning of doubt. "You shouldn't have done that," Denise said quietly, and she meant every word. The moment Roy's hand left her shoulder, something shifted in the room. It was like the air itself had changed, becoming heavier and charged with electricity. Everyone felt it. The men standing behind Roy, the old man behind the counter, even Roy himself. Something had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Denise stood perfectly still. She didn't raise her hands. She didn't step back. She just looked at Roy with those calm, steady eyes, and somehow that was more unsettling than if she had screamed or tried to run. Roy felt a chill run down his spine, but he pushed it away. He was too proud to listen to his instincts, too drunk to recognize danger when it was standing right in front of him. "What?" he said, trying to sound tough. "You gonna cry now? Run back to your car?" Denise didn't answer. She was watching him the way a hawk watches a mouse in an open field, patient, focused, waiting. Roy's confidence wavered for just a second, but then he heard one of his friends snicker behind him. The sound reminded him that he had an audience. He couldn't look weak. Not now. Not in front of his boys. "I asked you a question," he growled, stepping closer again. "What are you gonna do about it?" "I already told you," Denise said. Her voice was quiet but clear. "You don't want to find out?" Roy laughed, but it sounded hollow, forced. "You think you're tough? You think because you got some attitude you can talk to me like that?" He jabbed a finger toward her face. "I've dealt with people like you my whole life." "You're nothing." "You hear me?" "Nothing." Behind him, Pete shifted uncomfortably. "Roy, maybe we should just go," he said again. There was a pleading note in his voice now. "She's not worth the trouble, man." "I said shut up." Roy snapped, whirling around to face his friend. His face was twisted with rage, the veins in his neck standing out. "I'm handling this." When he turned back to Denise, she hadn't moved an inch. She was still standing in the same spot, still holding her bottle of water, still watching him with that unreadable expression. It was driving him crazy. He wanted to see fear. He wanted to see her tremble, wanted to hear her beg him to leave her alone. But she wasn't giving him any of that. The old man behind the counter spoke up again. "I've called the sheriff," he said. His voice was stronger now, though his hands were shaking. "They're on their way. Maybe you boys should clear out before they get here." Roy ignored him. His whole world had narrowed down to the woman standing in front of him. She had embarrassed him. She had made him look weak. And he wasn't going to let her walk out of here thinking she had won. "You think some small-town sheriff is gonna save you?" Roy said to Denise. "They'll take their sweet time getting here. That's how things work around here. And by the time they show up, you'll be long gone. Running away like you should have done in the first place." Denise finally moved. She set the bottle of water down on a nearby shelf, slowly and deliberately. Then she turned back to Roy and crossed her arms over her chest. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. "And neither are you. We're going to wait right here until the sheriff arrives. And then you're going to explain to them why you think it's okay to harass and assault a stranger, just because she stopped to get gas." Roy's eyes bulged. "Assault?" he sputtered. "I barely touched you." "You put your hands on me without my permission," Denise said calmly. "That's assault. And there's a witness right there behind the counter. Plus, I'm guessing this store has security cameras. So everything you've done and said has been recorded." For the first time, real fear flickered across Roy's face. He glanced up at the ceiling and saw the small black dome of a security camera pointed right at him. His friends saw it too, and a couple of them started backing toward the door. "Man, I'm out of here," one of them muttered. I ain't getting arrested for this. Me neither, another one said. They pushed through the door and disappeared outside, the bell jingling behind them. Now it was just Roy, Pete, and one other guy left. Pete looked like he wanted to run too, but he was frozen in place, caught between loyalty to Roy and his own survival instincts. Roy's face had gone from red to pale. The alcohol was still clouding his judgment, but even he could see that things had gone sideways. He had expected an easy target. He had expected a scared woman who would cower and cry and give him the satisfaction he was looking for. Instead, he had found someone who refused to break, but his pride wouldn't let him walk away. Not yet. You think you're smart, he said, his voice low and dangerous. You think you've got this all figured out? But you don't know who you're dealing with. I know people in this town. I know the sheriff personally. You think he's gonna take your word over mine? Denise smiled. It was a small smile, barely there, but it made Roy's blood run cold. I think he's going to watch the security footage, she said. And I think he's going to see exactly what happened here. A group of men following a woman into a store, surrounding her, threatening her, putting their hands on her. She paused. That doesn't look good for you, no matter who you know. Roy's jaw clenched. He was trapped and he knew it. But instead of backing down, he did what men like him always do. He doubled down. You know what? He said, his voice rising. I'm done playing games. You want to call the cops? Fine. But before they get here, I'm gonna teach you a lesson you won't forget. He raised his fist. Pete grabbed his arm. Roy, don't, he shouted. Are you crazy? She's right, there's cameras everywhere. Roy shook him off violently. Get off me. He turned back to Denise, his fist still raised. You think I'm scared of cameras? You think I'm scared of you? Denise uncrossed her arms and let them hang loose at her sides. Her weight shifted slightly, her feet moving into a position that Roy didn't recognize but should have. It was the same stance she had taught to hundreds of soldiers. The same stance she had used in combat zones thousands of miles from this little gas station. Last chance, she said softly. Walk away. Right now. And this ends here. Roy swung. It was a wild punch, fueled by alcohol and rage and wounded pride. He put everything he had into it, aiming straight for her face. In his mind, he saw the punch connecting, saw her falling to the ground, saw himself standing over her in triumph. But the punch never landed. Denise moved like water. 1 second, she was standing in front of him, and the next she was beside him, his arms sailing through empty air. Before he could understand what had happened, she had grabbed his wrist and twisted. Pain shot up his arm like fire, and suddenly he was spinning. His feet tangled beneath him. He hit the ground hard, face first against the cold tile floor. The impact knocked the wind out of him. He tried to push himself up, but his arm was locked behind his back, bent at an angle that made every movement send bolts of agony through his body. He couldn't move. He couldn't breathe. All he could do was lie there on the floor of a gas station convenience store, completely and utterly defeated. Above him, Denise's voice was calm as ever. I warned you, she said. You should have listened. The convenience store had gone completely silent. The only sounds were Roy's heavy breathing and the quiet hum of the refrigerators against the back wall. Pete stood frozen near the door, his mouth hanging open. The other guy who had stayed behind was pressed against a shelf of potato chips. Looking like he wanted to disappear into the wall, the old man behind the counter had risen from his seat, his eyes wide behind his thick glasses. He had seen a lot of things in his years running this gas station, but nothing quite like this. Roy groaned against the floor. His face was pressed into the cold tile, and his arm was twisted behind his back at an angle that made his whole body scream with pain. Every time he tried to move, even just a little bit, the pain got worse. He had never felt so helpless in his entire life. Let me go, he gasped. You're breaking my arm. I'm not breaking anything, Denise said calmly. She was kneeling beside him, one knee pressed lightly against his back, her hands controlling his arm with precise pressure. If I wanted to break your arm, you would know it. Right now, I'm just holding you still. Please, Roy whimpered. All the bravado had drained out of him. All the tough talk and swagger had vanished the moment he hit the ground. Now he was just a scared man lying on the floor of a gas station, completely at the mercy of someone he had badly underestimated. Pete finally found his voice. "Lady, please just let him go. He's drunk." He didn't mean it. "We'll leave, I swear. We'll leave right now, and you'll never see us again." Denise didn't even look at him. Her eyes stayed focused on Roy. "Your friend made a choice," she said. "He followed me into this store. He threatened me. He put his hands on me. And then he tried to punch me in the face. Those were all choices he made. Now he gets to live with the consequences. Who are you?" Roy managed to say. His voice was muffled against the floor. How did you do that?" Denise was quiet for a moment. Then she leaned down, just a little, so that Roy could hear her clearly. "My name is Denise Carter," she said. "I'm a sergeant first class in the United States Army. I've been serving for 12 years. I've done 2 combat deployments overseas. And for the past 4 years, I've been a combatives instructor at Fort Liberty. That means I teach soldiers how to fight. I teach them how to defend themselves in close quarters against enemies who are trying to kill them." She paused to let the words sink in. "You're not a soldier," she continued. "You're not a trained fighter. You're just a bully who's used to picking on people who can't fight back. But today you picked the wrong person. And this is what happens when you do that." Roy's body had gone limp. He wasn't struggling anymore. He wasn't even trying to talk back. He just lay there, defeated and humiliated, as the reality of the situation washed over him. Pete's face had gone white. He looked at Denise with something that might have been fear, or might have been respect, or might have been both. "Army?" he said weakly. "She's Army?" "Combatives instructor," the old man behind the counter repeated. There was a note of wonder in his voice. "Well, I'll be. I thought something was different about her. I could see it in the way she carried herself." The sound of sirens cut through the air. Faint at first, but growing louder. The sheriff was on the way. Denise looked toward the door, then back down at Roy. "Here's what's going to happen," she said. "The sheriff is going to come in here. He's going to see you on the ground. He's going to watch the security footage. And then he's going to arrest you for assault." "That's not a threat. That's just a fact." Roy didn't respond. He had nothing left to say. "But before he gets here, I want you to understand something." Denise's voice was quiet but firm. "What you did today wasn't just stupid. It was wrong. You saw a woman by herself and you thought she was an easy target. You thought you could scare her, hurt her, make yourself feel powerful. That's what bullies do. They pick on people they think are weak." She shook her head slowly. "But here's the thing about weakness. You can't always see it from the outside. That woman you thought was weak? She might be a soldier. She might be a mother who's been through things you can't imagine. She might be someone who survived more than you ever will. You don't know what people have been through. You don't know what they're capable of." She released her grip on his arm and stood up, taking a step back. Roy stayed on the ground, not moving, not even trying to get up. "So the next time you think about harassing someone just because they look different from you, just because you think they don't belong, remember this moment. Remember lying on this floor. Remember how it felt to be completely powerless. And ask yourself if it's really worth it." The sirens were very close now. Through the windows, Denise could see the flashing lights of a sheriff's car pulling into the gas station parking lot. Pete rushed to the door. "I'm going," he said desperately. "I wasn't part of this. I tried to stop him." "You stood there and watched," Denise said flatly. "You could have walked away at any time. You could have told him to stop. You made your choice too." Pete's face crumpled, but he didn't argue. He just pushed through the door and ran toward the parking lot, his hands raised above his head as the sheriff's car came to a stop. The other guy who had stayed behind was already gone. He must have slipped out during the commotion. It didn't matter. There was security footage. The sheriff would find him if they needed to. Roy finally pushed himself up to his knees. His face was red and swollen from being pressed against the floor. There were tears in his eyes, though whether from pain or shame, Denise couldn't tell. Probably both. I'm sorry, he mumbled. The words came out broken and weak. I'm sorry, okay? I was drunk. I wasn't thinking. Denise looked at him for a long moment. She had heard apologies like this before. From bullies, from abusers, from people who only felt sorry because they got caught. She knew that most of them didn't mean it. They were just trying to get out of trouble, but maybe, just maybe, this one would be different. Maybe this moment would stay with Roy for the rest of his life. Maybe the next time he thought about hurting someone, he would remember the feeling of his face against that cold floor. Tell that to the sheriff, she said finally. Not me. The door swung open and 2 deputies walked in. They took one look at the scene and immediately moved toward Roy, who was still on his knees in the middle of the store. What happened here? One of them asked, looking from Roy to Denise to the old man behind the counter. The old man spoke up before anyone else could. This man and his friends followed that young lady into my store, he said, pointing at Roy. They threatened her. He put his hands on her. Then he tried to punch her. He shook his head in amazement. But she handled herself just fine. Turns out she's some kind of army fighting instructor. The deputy raised his eyebrows and looked at Denise with new interest. Is that right? Denise nodded. Combatives instructor. Fort Liberty. 12 years in service? The deputy let out a low whistle. Well, sir, he said to Roy, sounds like you picked the wrong person to mess with today. Roy said nothing. He just stared at the ground as the deputies pulled him to his feet and put handcuffs around his wrist. Denise watched them lead him out of the store. She didn't feel triumphant. She didn't feel proud. She just felt tired. Tired of people like Roy. Tired of having to prove herself. Tired of a world where a woman couldn't even stop for gas without being harassed. But she also felt something else. Something quieter. She felt strong. She had faced a threat and handled it the way she had been trained. She hadn't lost her cool. She hadn't let them break her. And that was something no one could ever take away. The parking lot of the gas station looked very different now than it had an hour ago. The motorcycles were still there, but their owners were scattered. Some had run off when they saw the sheriff's car coming. Others were sitting on the curb with their hands behind their heads while deputies checked their identification. Turned out a couple of them had outstanding warrants. They wouldn't be riding anywhere today. Roy sat in the back of a sheriff's car, his head bowed, his hands cuffed behind him. Through the window, Denise could see his face. The arrogance was gone. The sneer was gone. He just looked empty, broken, like a man who had finally been forced to see himself for who he really was. Denise stood near her car, answering questions from a young deputy who was taking her statement. She told him everything from the beginning. How she had stopped for gas. How Roy and his friends had approached her. How they had followed her into the store. How Roy had shoved her, then tried to punch her. She kept her voice calm and steady throughout, just like she had been trained. The deputy wrote everything down in his notebook. When she finished, he looked up at her with something like admiration in his eyes. Sergeant First Class, huh? He said, Combatives instructor? That's right, Denise replied. He shook his head slowly. Lady, he had no idea what he was getting into. No, Denise agreed. He didn't. The deputy closed his notebook. Well, we've got the security footage from inside the store. Matches up with everything you told me. Plus the owner is willing to testify. This is about as clear-cut a case as I've ever seen. He glanced over at the sheriff's car where Roy was sitting. He's looking at assault charges, at minimum. Probably some hate crime enhancements, too, based on the things he said to you. Denise nodded, but didn't say anything. She wasn't interested in revenge. She wasn't interested in seeing Roy suffer. She just wanted justice. She wanted to know that what happened to her mattered, that it would be taken seriously, that Roy wouldn't be able to do the same thing to someone else. The deputy seemed to understand. You did good, he said quietly. A lot of people would have panicked in that situation. You kept your cool? Handled it perfectly. I've had training, Denise said simply. Yeah, well, training is one thing. Keeping your head when you're actually in danger is another. He extended his hand. Thank you for your service, ma'am. And I'm sorry this happened to you. This isn't what our town is about. Denise shook his hand. I appreciate that. She watched the deputy walk back to his car, then turned to look at the gas station one more time. The old man who ran the place was standing in the doorway, watching the scene unfold. When he caught her eye, he raised his hand in a small wave. She waved back. A few minutes later, the sheriff's cars pulled out of the parking lot, taking Roy and his friends with them. The remaining bikers who hadn't been arrested scattered quickly, climbing onto their motorcycles and roaring away down the highway. Within moments, the gas station was quiet again. Just an ordinary roadside stop on a Saturday morning. Denise got back into her car. She sat there for a moment, hands on the steering wheel, taking a few deep breaths. Her heart was beating normally now. The adrenaline had faded. She felt calm but also drained. Encounters like that always took something out of her. Even when she came out on top dot, she thought about calling her grandmother to let her know she was running late, but decided against it. She would explain everything when she got there. Right now, she just wanted to drive. The highway stretched out ahead of her, empty and peaceful. The sun had climbed higher in the sky, and the fields on either side of the road were glowing golden in the light. It was beautiful country, she had to admit. Most of the people who lived here were probably good. Decent folks who would be horrified to know what had happened at that gas station, but there were always a few like Roy, people who carried around so much anger and hatred that they couldn't see straight. People who needed to make themselves feel big by making others feel small. She had encountered them all her life in the army and out of it. They came in all shapes and sizes, all colors and backgrounds. The one thing they had in common was that hollow place inside them, that emptiness they tried to fill by hurting others. Denise didn't hate Roy. She almost felt sorry for him, almost whatever had made him the way he was. Whatever pain or fear or insecurity drove him to act the way he did, it had led him to this moment. Sitting in the back of a police car, facing charges that could land him in jail. All because he couldn't leave a stranger alone. She hoped he would learn from it. She hoped that lying on that floor, feeling completely powerless, would stay with him. Maybe it would make him think twice the next time he wanted to pick on someone. Maybe it would be the wake-up call he needed, or maybe not. Some people never learned. Some people went to their graves holding on to their bitterness and hate, never understanding what it had cost them, but that wasn't her problem. She had done what she needed to do. She had stood her ground. She had defended herself. And now she was going to go have lunch with her grandmother and put the whole thing behind her. An hour later, she pulled into the driveway of a small white house with blue shutters and a vegetable garden in the front yard. Her grandmother was already standing on the porch, a dish towel in her hands, a worried look on her face. "You're late," the old woman called out as Denise got out of the car. I was starting to think something happened. Denise walked up the porch steps and wrapped her grandmother in a hug. The old woman was small and thin, but her arms were strong, and she held on tight. "Something did happen," Denise said. "But I'm okay. I'll tell you all about it over lunch." Her grandmother pulled back and studied her face with sharp, knowing eyes. After a moment, she nodded slowly. "You handled it," she said. "It wasn't a question." "Yes, ma'am. I handled it." The old woman smiled and patted her cheek. "That's my girl. Now come inside. Food's getting cold." They sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by plates of fried chicken and collard greens and cornbread and sweet tea. Denise told her grandmother the whole story while they ate. The old woman listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from concern to anger to pride. When Denise finished, her grandmother shook her head slowly. "Some people never learn," she said. "They go through life thinking they can push everyone around. Then they run into someone who pushes back and they don't know what to do." She took a sip of her tea. "The Lord protects fools and children, but that man was definitely a fool." Denise laughed. It felt good to laugh. It felt good to be sitting in her grandmother's kitchen, surrounded by the smells of home cooking, listening to the old woman's wisdom. "You did right," her grandmother continued. You didn't start nothing, but you finished it. That's all anyone can do. Denise nodded. That's all anyone can do, she repeated. They finished their lunch and moved to the front porch, where they sat in rocking chairs and watched the afternoon light fade over the fields. They talked about other things, about family and memories and plans for the future. The incident at the gas station faded into the background. Just another story in a life full of stories, but Denise knew she would never forget it. Not because of Roy or his friends or the ugly words they had said, but because of what it had reminded her. That she was strong, that she was capable, that no matter what challenges life threw at her, she could handle them. She had earned that strength through years of training and service. And no one, not Roy, not anyone, could ever take it away from her. As the sun set behind the trees, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Denise closed her eyes and smiled. It had been a good day after all.